What's up, YouTube? So, have you ever noticed, have you ever seen and clocked the pattern when it comes to colorism stories? Because oftentimes in stories, there's usually like, the main character who's usually seen as the protagonist, and you have the antagonist who's seen as like, the villain. But oftentimes in colorism stories, uh, dark skin and brown skin males tend to be cast as the villain in colorism stories. Is that something, perhaps you've noticed? And by the way, if you are brown skin, a dark skinned a man, is that something that you picked up on? And by the way, if you don't care, then don't comment and don't watch. Because I don't want to hear no I don't care in the comment section. I don't want to see that. Because there's a lot of videos that you really don't care about and that you really don't even click on and that you sure as hell don't comment on. So miss me with that shit. If you really don't care, keep it moving. But I just want to talk about that and explore that a little bit and just kind of explain why that is. All right. And I'll start off with, sometimes dark skinned and brown skinned men truly are the villains in the story. It's not, that's something that I don't think we can just ignore or sweep under the rug or overlook, but oftentimes that does seem to be the case. Not all the time, right? It kind of really depends on who's telling the story to an extent. You know, like, for example, if dark-skinned women are telling the story, oftentimes it's, black men in general. Sometimes she may specify dark skin or brown skin black men, and as well, sometimes she may specify and talk about light skinned and biracial females, right? It depends on who's telling the story. Um, then if it's a light skinned woman telling the story, it may tend to be the dark skinned females cast as a villain. And sometimes, depending on the mentality of the light-skinned biracial female, she may cast the brown-skinned, dark-skinned black man as the villain, either as well or just only. It just depends. And usually we tend to get colorism stories more from women than from men. And that leads into the next situation, or the next reason why this may be. Probably why this is, really. I'll say that. Black men, honestly, across all skin tones, tend to not tell their colorism stories. Since those stories aren't told, since, there's not much black male representation, period, in the conversation of colorism, folks tend to just, assume the story, or assume the dark skin and brown skin men's story. And kind of just be like, oh, okay, well, I've had this experience and you've had this experience, kind of like with the women, they kind of come to that conclusion sometimes. Yeah. And as well, I do think that male representation in colorism stories, as far as men sharing colorism stories, I think it is very important if we're really going to, deal and solve this colorism problem so that the next generation doesn't have to really deal with this, bullshit. Yeah. And as well, I do think that, every segment of the community, perhaps maybe not like the peanut butter folks, but even they have a story, But I think like typically the segments of the community, dark skin, light skin, males and females, what have you, tend to deal with colorism. I think ultimately it affects the community, you know. However, there's some silencing that happens, right? Oftentimes, black men, especially dark-skinned and brown-skinned black men, tend to lead the charge when it comes to silencing colorism stories, you know, sweeping them under the rug, shaming them, guilting them, you know, gaslighting, right? Yeah. And why do you think that is? Because, you know, let some of these men tell it, you know, they have stories about, you know, colorism that they themselves have experienced, you know? So it's like, well, if you've experienced colorism, why wouldn't you want to speak out about it, right? But that leads into the next thing, all right? And I'm going to make a metaphor that could trigger some people, so trigger warning, trigger warning, trigger warning, all right? I'm going to make a metaphor that involves child molestation, all right? Warning. So if that's something that triggers you, then I suggest, you know, strongly suggest that you just exit this video right now. All right. All right, here I go with this metaphor, and I think this metaphor will really um, make things make more sense and even give some people an epiphany. All right. So let's talk about, say, child molestation, the victims of child molestation. All right. Some victims of child molestation go on and live their lives and do not molest children, or go on to become child molesters themselves, right? They even sometimes, you know, go on to speak out against child molesters and, you know, to advocate for justice for victims of child molestation, right? But then you have some victims of child molestation who go on to indulge in it themselves, who go on to perpetuate child molestation themselves. If you are yourself indulging in child molestation and perpetuating it, how likely are you to really speak out about it? Because you yourself, you may have been a victim, and that should be taken into an account, or taken into account. That should. However, that does not absolve you of your responsibility for what you've done, right? And they know that. You know? And notice when it comes to child molesters, make sure that they make sure to make their victims, you know, scared with the scare tactics, like, oh, if you speak out, you know, I'm going to kill your mom or your dad or something like that, or I'm going to kill you, or, you know, some type of a scare tactic, right, to scare them into silence, right? You know, maybe even a shaming tactic, like, oh, like, oh, you know that it felt good, right? Oh, you know, I don't really want to get too much deeper into it because you know, that's not really something like I thought that is really pleasant, you know. But I say all that to make a metaphor, right? And to compare it to this situation. Sometimes some dark-skinned men and brown-skinned men are, you know, victims of colorism, legitimate victims of colorism. But oftentimes, in order for them to deal with their own colorism issues, they tend to participate in colorism, you know, versus speaking out about it and sharing their experience. Because just in general, as men, you know, you don't, and just as people to an extent, really, but you kind of don't want to come off as like, you know, vulnerable, weak, you know. And as well, the colorism story has sort of been feminized anyway. You know, in fact, I had someone, you know, low key post something like that about some of the stuff I was talking about, or on a video. Um, Even though, you know, oddly enough, I checked their page and they're subscribed to me, and they've been subscribed to me for a minute. I'm just saying, you know, it's some feminine shit, but you still looking at it. You still subscribe to it. So it must resonate with you in some sort of a way. You may not want to admit it, but it's true. And to be fair, this is not, only exclusive to dark-skinned, brown-skinned males. The dark-skinned, brown-skinned females may tend to do something like this themselves to a lesser extent, and perhaps even the light-skinned people may perhaps do it to like some sort of extent, you know. But this is something that I really do see when it comes to the brown-skinned, dark-skinned men, right? There's no problem speaking out about racism because it tends to not deal with, for the brown-skinned, dark-skinned men, it tends not to deal with, self-esteem issues, right? And no one wants to admit that they have self-esteem issues or, have experienced some sort of a issue related to their self-esteem and idea of self-worth and etc., right? But with racism, it usually doesn't revolve around that. It's more like, oh, violence. I've experienced violence, or I've experienced some sort of discrimination in the labor force, police brutality of some sort. It's the conversation is different, right? And as well, just in general, people who indulge in things just generally don't speak out against them, right? Even though they were a victim, you know, and within the court of law, you would still have to answer for what you've done, even if you were a victim. But now you become the victimizer, right? You become the perpetuator of it. Also, one thing that I noticed that I don't like is that oftentimes when the brown skin and dark skinned men do speak out about colorism and share their colorism experiences, sometimes there can be a bit like too much coddling, honestly. I guess maybe because people just aren't used to it, and people maybe want to encourage it perhaps to happen a bit more, but sometimes there can be a bit too much coddling, especially in comparison to what the dark-skinned women tend to experience when they speak out about colorism. There tends to not be so much coddling involved for some reason. Even when the dude is being kind of foul, like I don't want no bitch as black as me, or I don't want to have no dark-skinned baby, right? Even when they being foul about it, sometimes there's still some coddling, black male coddling involved. Like, just in general, really, when it comes to the community, it's like, that is like, sometimes it's like the black men get coddled to death. Like, the darker they are, the more they get coddled. I mean, I swear, sometimes it's like, these dudes can be like thugs, they can do drugs, they can shoot up the club, steal a Persian rug, like so many things, like sell drugs too, like, and it's just so much coddling that is involved sometimes. Well, a lot of times, it's just like, to an extent, like these dudes can just get away with murder because the community gives them cover for some reason. Just in general, but even within the context of colorism, that still happens. Like, heck, look at that whole Stefan Clark situation. And like compare it to like, say, I think Kanika Jenkins, that young lady that got trapped in the freezer, I think. I'm not really familiar with that story, but I did, hear little bits and pieces about the story. I didn't, it was just seemed just too depressing, and especially how some black people were reacting in like a negative way. Like, it just, I didn't, I just had to skip out on that one. Also, like, say, Corinne Gaines or Sandra Bland, right? There seems to be not so much coddling when it comes to the females, right? But when it comes to, like, say, Stefan Clark and some of these dudes that were other victims of police brutality, who kind of low-key put themselves in the line of fire to be victims of police brutality. To be honest, the way that some of these dudes live, some of their backgrounds, you know, as well. I think that rapper XXX or something like that. There was some low-key calling happening even with that dude. And like some of these dudes, like Tenacious and Stefan Clark, have like histories of colorism, documented colorism, as well as history, of violence against women and so many other things, right? But still, there was some space and given to them, like, oh, they're young, they were young, they, were going to become better people as they got older, stuff like that. But with the women, it doesn't seem like that same courtesy is given for some reason. Heck, even just look at like R. Kelly, Eddie Long, Africa Bambaataa. The community tends to give those guys cover. That's why R. Kelly's been able to do what R. Kelly has been doing for so long, right? And I know those examples may be a bit extreme, but that's kind of like the point, though. Look how extreme they are, and we're, to an extent, still just giving them cover. They can still go on and do it, do what they want, And also, another thing that I noticed, when it comes to the black men, for some reason, it tends to be more so like, every saint has a past, every sinner has a future. That seems to be the mentality. But when it comes to the women, sometimes it's more like, there's no redeeming. You can't redeem yourself, right? Just look at that whole like Sierra Russell Wilson situation. Folks, particularly black men, for some reason, did not want to see Sierra like win. Did not want to see Sierra redeem herself, right? Yeah, she made a dumb mistake, but haven't we all made dumb mistakes at one point or another? But then when it comes to like some of these dudes who, become like millionaires and maybe, are multimillionaires and whatnot, and through like rap music and perpetuating gang culture and stereotypes, this, that, and the third, right? Then it's like, oh, every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. And I think something like that came up with someone from A Tribe Called Quest. I forgot his name, but he kind of mentioned that when he saw a picture of all these rap dudes, rappers, right? Talking about, all of them kind of came up based on some, more or less, some fuckery, right? They kind of got their come up perpetuating fuckery, right? And then in the news, once they hit the news, they flipped it around and tried to blame Raven-Symoné because she liked the tweet. You notice that? They didn't really come after the black man who said it or even include him much in the story. They came after Raven-Symoné just for liking the tweet. Yeah, and there's some things about Raven that we've talked about, but nevertheless, I don't think that that's one of them. But my bad. I kind of went off on a bit of a rant there, but I still think that rant low-key applies to some of this. But I'm going to bring this video to a close. I didn't mean to go on for this long. My apologies. But thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it, definitely. Please feel free to leave your comments. I really am interested in, what you think about this. And as well, especially to the brown-skinned and dark-skinned men out there, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I go, I'm definitely interested in, hearing your feedback just in general, but also specifically to this video as well. And for the record, once again, for the record, I ain't got nothing but love for my brown skin and dark skin brothers. Alright? But love, sometimes it's tough. Sometimes you gotta be tough with it. Sometimes love hurts. You know? You know? But yeah, thanks a lot for watching, you guys. Until the next video, adios and goodbye for now.